Your production database is on Amazon RDS, fully managed, automated backups, automatic failover, point-and-click configuration. You don't think about the underlying infrastructure. That's the whole point. Then degraded performance. Queries taking 10x normal time. You check the RDS console. Everything shows healthy. You check CloudWatch metrics. CPU is normal. Memory is fine. IOPS are within limits. But your application is dying. You need to investigate the actual instance. Check query execution. Examine locks and connections. Except you can't. RDS doesn't give you that access. The abstraction is hiding the problem from you. You escalate to AWS support. They investigate internal systems you can't see. The abstraction failed. It stopped hiding complexity gracefully and started hiding problems you desperately needed to diagnose. This is abstraction failure, when the simple interface stops working but doesn't completely break. And sometimes, abstractions don't just fail. They collapse entirely. Let's explore both. Abstraction failure is when the abstraction layer continues to exist but stops functioning correctly, causing implementation details to leak, behavior to degrade, or promises to break. Performance degradation that reveals hidden layers. Your serverless functions suddenly have 2-second cold starts instead of 200 milliseconds. The abstraction promises you don't think about infrastructure. But now you're forced to understand container initialization, image pulling, and resource allocation, all hidden layers that are clearly breaking. The abstraction didn't prevent the problem. It just prevented you from diagnosing it. Inconsistent behavior exposing underlying architecture. Your object storage abstraction promises strong consistency. Suddenly you're seeing stale reads. The abstraction is failing to deliver its promised behavior, and the failure reveals distributed system realities underneath. Eventual consistency, replication lag, cache invalidation failures. The simple just works abstraction is now exposing complex failure modes you thought were abstracted away, monitoring gaps during failures. The abstraction provides dashboards with high-level metrics. During failures, those metrics are stale, incomplete, or misleading. You need deeper visibility, system logs, internal metrics, subsystem health. But the abstraction doesn't expose those. You can see something is wrong, but not what or why. The abstraction fails to provide adequate observability during the very moments you need it most. API degradation, revealing control plane architecture. Normal operations are smooth. During high load or partial outages, API calls start timing out. Rate limits kick in aggressively. Operations queue unexpectedly. The abstraction pretended APIs were limitless and instant. Failure reveals there's a control plane with capacity limits, queuing systems, and load prioritization logic you never needed to understand until now. Inconsistent abstractions across regions. Your application works perfectly in US East 1. Deploy the same setup to EU West 1, and abstractions behave differently. Different performance characteristics, different limits, different failure modes. The abstraction promised portability. Failure reveals that implementations vary by region in ways the abstraction didn't expose. Failure is frustrating because the abstraction still technically exists. You're still using managed services, still working through APIs, but it's no longer hiding what it promised to hide. You're stuck between abstraction and implementation, unable to operate effectively at either level. Abstraction collapse is when the abstraction layer itself becomes completely unavailable or non-functional, forcing you to operate at lower layers or leaving you with no operational capability at all. Control plane outages causing complete abstraction failure. The ultimate collapse, AWS Management Console is down. APIs return 500 errors. CLI tools can't connect. The entire control plane, the layer that implements the abstraction, is gone. Your infrastructure keeps running because the data plane is separate, but you can't manage anything. You can't scale, can't deploy, can't modify configurations, can't respond to problems. The abstraction hasn't just failed, it's completely absent. Authentication system failures Collapsing. Access abstractions. The abstraction gives you identity and access management. Then the identity provider has an outage. Nobody can log in. MFA systems are unreachable. Service accounts can't authenticate. The abstraction that controls access to everything else has collapsed. Infrastructure exists, but is effectively unreachable because the authentication abstraction is gone. Cascading failures across abstraction layers. A failure at one layer causes the layer above to fail, which causes the next layer to fail. Network abstraction fails, breaking the compute abstraction, breaking the platform abstraction, breaking application abstractions. The collapse propagates upward through the stack. Each abstraction layer depended on the one below, and when the foundation collapses, everything above falls. Regional infrastructure failures collapsing geographic abstractions. Cloud abstractions present regions as interchangeable, available options. Then an entire region goes down. Power failure, network partition, data center incident. The abstraction of just pick a region collapses. If your workload is region-bound by data residency requirements or because you didn't architect for multi-region, you're completely out of operation. The abstraction collapse reveals you were more dependent on specific physical infrastructure than the abstractions suggested. Service deprecation, forcing abstraction abandonment. The provider announces, this service is being retired in 6 months. The abstraction you built on is being deliberately collapsed by the provider. You're forced to migrate to a different abstraction, rewrite applications, or move to different infrastructure entirely. The collapse is planned, but it's still collapse. The abstraction you depended on will cease to exist. Vendor lock-in making abstraction collapse catastrophic. When abstractions collapse and you discover you can't easily migrate because you're locked into provider-specific implementations, the collapse becomes existential. You can't switch providers quickly. You can't fall back to on-premises. The abstraction collapsed, and you have no alternatives. This is why abstraction collapse is more dangerous than it appears. It's not just the current system failing. It's discovering you have no viable escape routes. Collapse is different from failure because there's no degraded state to work in. The abstraction is simply gone. You either have alternative abstractions to fail over to, lower-level access that bypasses the collapsed layer, or you're completely dead in the water waiting for recovery. So what do you do when abstractions fail or collapse? For failure, build observability that sees through abstractions. Don't rely solely on abstraction-level monitoring. Implement end-to-end observability that catches problems even when abstraction-level metrics look normal. Synthetic monitoring, real user monitoring, application-level instrumentation. These detect failures that abstraction dashboards miss. Maintain runbooks for operating degraded abstractions. When abstractions fail but don't collapse, how do you operate? Document procedures for working around abstraction limitations during failures. How do you manually verify what automated systems should do? How do you diagnose problems with limited visibility? For collapse, design for multi-layer redundancy. Don't depend on a single abstraction layer. If the control plane collapses, can you use direct API endpoints? If the regional abstraction collapses, do you have multi-region architecture? If the cloud provider's abstractions collapse, do you have hybrid or multi-cloud options? Maintain out-of-band access and control. Break glass procedures that work when primary abstractions are down. Alternative authentication paths, secondary management interfaces, offline documentation. These let you operate when normal abstraction layers have collapsed. For both, accept that perfect abstraction is temporary. Abstractions will fail. Some will collapse. Systems built assuming abstractions never break are fragile. Design with the assumption that you'll occasionally need to operate without the abstractions you depend on. And critically, plan for provider communication during abstraction failures. When abstractions fail or collapse, you need information from the provider. Establish escalation paths before incidents. Understand support SLAs. Have relationships with account teams. The abstraction might hide complexity during normal operations, but during failures, you need human communication channels to get information the broken abstraction can't provide. Abstraction failure is when the simple interface stops working but doesn't disappear. Leaking implementation degrading behavior, breaking promises. Abstraction collapse is when the abstraction layer itself becomes unavailable, forcing you to operate at lower levels or leaving you completely unable to operate. Both reveal the same truth. Abstractions are powerful until they're not, and when they break, the complexity you thought was eliminated is just complexity you're unprepared to handle. And remember, the abstraction is protecting you from complexity until the moment it isn't. Plan for that moment. See you next time.